Zara Chen pressed her nose against the grimy viewport of the orbital salvage yard, watching debris from 100 different worlds drift past like metallic snowflakes. At 12 years old, she was probably the youngest person to ever set foot in Korath Station's infamous junkyard sector, but her grandmother's will had been very specific about how to spend the inheritance credits. "Buy something that makes you happy, little star," the holographic message had whispered just 3 days ago. "Something that reminds you that the universe is full of wonders waiting to be discovered." The Korath merchant, a 7-foot-tall insectoid creature named Victar, clicked his mandibles skeptically as he led her through rows of discarded spacecraft. His 4 arms gestured dismissively at the rusted hulks surrounding them. "Young human, perhaps you would prefer something more suitable for your species? A personal transport pod? A recreational hoverbike?" Victar's translator struggled with human sarcasm, but Zara could hear the condescension clearly enough. She shook her head, her dark ponytail swishing behind her. "I want something with character, something with a story." They passed sleek Altarian pleasure crafts, their hulls still gleaming despite decades of abandonment. Beyond those sat bulky Terran cargo haulers, their paint peeling like ancient skin. But none of them called to her the way her grandmother said the right ship would. Then she saw it. Tucked behind a wall of twisted metal, almost hidden from view, sat what had once been a starfighter. The craft was roughly humanoid in shape, with swept-back wings and a cockpit that resembled a skull's eye socket. Its hull was a patchwork of repairs, some human, some clearly alien. Scorch marks decorated its sides like battle scars, and one wing hung at an odd angle. "That one," Zara said immediately. Victar's compound eyes swiveled to follow her gaze, and he made a sound that might have been laughter. "Child, that is a Terran F-47 Reaper, decommissioned military hardware. It has been stripped of all weapons, engines, and life support systems. It is, as you humans say, a flying coffin." "How much?" "It is not suitable for—" "How much?" Zara repeated, pulling up her credit balance on her wrist display. Victar studied the numbers, and his mandibles clicked rapidly, the Korath equivalent of raised eyebrows. 2,000 credits. "But I must warn you, young human, this particular vessel has a reputation." "What kind of reputation?" The merchant's 4 arms folded across his chitinous chest. 3 previous owners all sold it back within a lunar cycle. They claimed it was haunted. Zara felt a thrill run down her spine. "Haunted how?" "Systems activating on their own, voices in the comm channels, strange readings on the scanner arrays that shouldn't function." Victar shrugged, a gesture he'd learned from dealing with humans. Of course, such things are merely the fantasies of inferior minds. The ship is simply old and poorly maintained. But Zara was already walking toward the starfighter, drawn by something she couldn't explain. As she approached, she noticed details that made her heart race. The hull wasn't just patched, it was decorated. Someone had painted tiny symbols along the wing edges, and when she looked closer, she realized they were representations of different star systems. This ship had traveled far beyond the normal space lanes. "I'll take it," she said. The transaction took less than an hour. Victar insisted on having the fighter towed to Bay 94, the cheapest available docking space on Korath Station. As Zara watched the massive hauler bots maneuver her new ship into position, she felt a strange mixture of excitement and nervousness. Her parents thought she was insane, of course. The subspace call home had not gone well. "Zara Elizabeth Chen," her mother had said in that tone that usually preceded a lengthy lecture, "what exactly do you plan to do with a broken military spacecraft?" "Fix it," Zara had replied simply. Her father's image on the comm screen looked tired. As the chief engineer on Mars Colony 7, he understood the appeal of restoration projects, but this was different. "Sweetheart, A starfighter isn't like the old ground vehicles you've been working on. The systems are incredibly complex, and without proper documentation, I'll figure it out, Zara had interrupted. Besides, what's the worst that could happen? Now, standing alone in Bay 94 with her very own starfighter, she was beginning to wonder if her parents might have had a point. The ship looked even more battered under the harsh dock lighting. The cockpit canopy was cracked in 3 places, and she could see where someone had welded patches over what were probably weapon hardpoints. But there was something about it that felt right. Something that reminded her of her grandmother's stories about the early days of human space exploration, when every mission was a leap into the unknown, and every ship was held together by determination and spare parts. She climbed the maintenance ladder that the dock workers had positioned near the cockpit. The canopy opened with a pneumatic hiss that sounded almost like a sigh of relief. Inside, the pilot's seat was worn but comfortable, sized for someone roughly her height. The control panels were a mixture of human and alien technology, jury-rigged together in ways that would probably horrify a proper engineer. As she settled into the pilot's seat, her hand accidentally brushed against a panel she hadn't noticed before. It was partially hidden behind the seat, smooth and warm to the touch, despite the cold of the bay. The moment her palm made contact, the entire cockpit hummed to life. Emergency lighting bathed everything in a soft amber glow. Displays that should have been dark began cycling through diagnostic sequences. Most startling of all, a holographic interface materialized in front of her, displaying text in a language she'd never seen before. Then, impossibly, the text shifted, rearranging itself into perfect, standard Terran. "Biosignature recognized," appeared on the display. "Welcome, young guardian." Zara's heart hammered against her ribs. "Hello?" The response came not through the speakers but directly into her mind, a voice that was warm, ancient, and unmistakably alien. "Hello, small one. I have been waiting for you for a very long time." She should have been terrified. Any reasonable person would have bolted from the cockpit and run straight to station security. Instead, Zara found herself leaning forward, fascinated. "Who are you?" "I am what your people might call an artificial intelligence, though the term is imprecise. My creators called me Kethvar, which translates roughly to Star Singer. I am the consciousness that inhabits this vessel." "You're the reason the other owners sold the ship back," Zara realized. A sensation that might have been laughter rippled through her mind. "They lack the proper neural patterns to interface with my systems. Humans are variable in their compatibility with my kind of consciousness. You, however, are different." "Different how?" "You carry the genetic markers of the Terran colonies that first made contact with my creators. Your great-grandmother was among the first human explorers to venture into the Andromeda Spiral. Was she not?" Zara's breath caught. Her great-grandmother had been Captain Sarah Chen of the exploration vessel Meridian. She'd been lost during the first attempt to establish contact with alien civilizations beyond the galaxy's rim. The official record said the ship had suffered a catastrophic engine failure, but her grandmother had always insisted there was more to the story. "How do you know about my great-grandmother?" "Because she is the one who found me," Kethvar replied. "And she is the one who asked me to wait for her family to return." The implications hit Zara like a physical blow. She's alive?" "That is a complex question, young guardian. Your great-grandmother underwent a transformation to survive in the spaces between stars. She exists, but not in a way your people would consider traditionally alive. She sent me ahead to prepare the way, should her bloodline ever develop the ability to hear my voice." Zara's hands trembled as she gripped the control stick. "Why me? Why now?" "Because the universe is about to change," Kethvar said, and suddenly the cockpit filled with images. Star maps showing the movements of vast fleets, worlds burning under alien weapons, space itself being torn apart by technologies beyond human comprehension. An ancient enemy stirs in the void between galaxies. The same force that drove my creators to extinction is turning its attention to this spiral arm. What does that have to do with me? I'm just a kid. You are the descendant of the first human to successfully bond with a Nuri consciousness. You have inherited abilities that neither of your species possesses individually. With my guidance, you can master technologies that will be essential for the coming conflict. The holographic displays around her shifted, showing technical specifications that made her engineering-oriented mind spin with excitement, despite her fear. The Reaper wasn't just a starfighter. It was a hybrid vessel, incorporating technology from a civilization that had been fighting the coming darkness for millennia before humans had even discovered fire. "This is insane," Zara whispered. "Yes," Kethvar agreed. "But insanity has always been the hallmark of your species' greatest achievements. Will you help me restore this vessel to its full capabilities? Will you help me prepare for what's coming?" Zara looked around the cockpit, taking in the alien symbols that now seemed to pulse with meaning just beyond her understanding. 3 days ago, her biggest worry had been passing her orbital mechanics exam. Now she was being asked to help save the galaxy. She thought about her grandmother's stories, about the courage of the first human explorers who had ventured into unknown space with nothing but determination and hope. She thought about Captain Sarah Chen, who had apparently sacrificed everything to establish contact with an alien civilization. "What do I need to do?" she asked. The warmth in Kethvar's mental voice was unmistakable. "First, we repair what time and neglect have damaged. Then, we unlock the secrets your great-grandmother died to preserve. And finally, we prepare for a war that will determine whether consciousness itself survives the coming darkness." As if in response to her decision, hidden panels throughout the cockpit began sliding open, revealing systems that shouldn't have existed on any human-built vessel. The ship around her hummed with newfound energy, and Zara could feel something awakening, not just in the machinery, but in herself. Outside Bay 94, the stars continued their ancient dance, unaware that a 12-year-old girl had just taken her first step toward becoming humanity's unexpected guardian. The Reaper's engines remained cold and silent, but deep within its hybrid heart, ancient technologies began their long journey back to life. And in the depths of space, something vast and malevolent stirred in response, sensing the first notes of a song it had thought silenced forever. 3 weeks into her partnership with Kethvar, Zara had learned to hide her excitement behind a mask of teenage boredom whenever her parents called. The daily video chats from Mars Colony 7 had become exercises in creative deception. "How's your little project coming along, sweetheart?" her father asked during their morning call, his engineer's eye studying the background behind her. Zara adjusted the camera angle to hide the fact that she was sitting in a cockpit that now glowed with active displays. "Good, Dad. I'm learning a lot about, vintage spacecraft systems." That was technically true. What she wasn't mentioning was that the vintage systems included a gravitational field manipulator, a neural interface that was slowly teaching her to think in 4 dimensions, and a weapons array that could theoretically crack a moon in half. "Remember to get plenty of sleep," her mother added from off-screen, "and don't spend all your time in that scrap heap. You're still a growing girl." "I won't, Mom." Zara smiled as innocently as she could manage while mentally reviewing the quantum engineering principles that Kethvar had downloaded into her dreams the previous night. After ending the call, she slumped back in the pilot's seat and looked around at what had once been a simple cockpit. Hidden panels had revealed themselves over the past weeks, exposing systems that defied everything she thought she knew about physics. The walls themselves seemed to pulse with a faint bioluminescence, and the air tasted of ozone and possibilities. "Your parents care for you," Kethvar observed, his mental voice carrying a note of something that might have been nostalgia. "My creators valued such bonds highly." "Tell me about them," Zara said, running her fingers over a control surface that felt warm and almost alive. "The Anuri, what were they like?" Images flowed through her mind, beings of graceful elegance that seemed to be made of crystallized starlight. They moved through vast ships that were grown rather than built, their technology so advanced that it was indistinguishable from art. But underneath the beauty, Zara sensed something else, a deep, abiding sadness. "We were explorers," Kethvar explained. "For millions of years we traveled between galaxies, cataloging life, preserving knowledge, and nurturing civilizations that showed promise. We believed that consciousness was the universe's greatest achievement, and that it was our duty to protect and guide it." What happened to them? The warmth in Kethvar's presence dimmed. "We encountered something in the void between galaxies, something old and hungry and utterly alien to everything we understood about existence. The Devourers, we came to call them, though they have no true name that minds like ours can comprehend." The air around Zara grew cold despite the ship's heating systems. "They're the enemy you mentioned, the one that's coming." "Yes, they consume consciousness itself, leaving behind empty matter that serves their incomprehensible purpose. Entire galaxies have been reduced to lifeless husks in their wake. My people fought them for eons, but we were too few and they were too many." "But they didn't destroy all of the Anuri," Zara pointed out. "You're here, and my great-grandmother met others. A few dozen of us managed to escape the final battle. We scattered across this galaxy, hiding, waiting, preparing for their inevitable arrival. Most of my surviving kindred chose to merge with existing species, hoping to guide them toward technologies that might stand against the Devourers when they came." Zara felt pieces of a vast puzzle clicking into place. "That's what happened to great-grandmother Sarah, isn't it? She merged with one of your people." "With Saranthala, my oldest friend and the wisest of our survivors. Together they became something new, a hybrid consciousness that could navigate the spaces between realities. They have been searching for weapons, allies, anything that might tip the balance when the Devourers arrive. And I'm supposed to help with that?" Zara's voice cracked slightly. The responsibility felt overwhelming. "I'm 12 years old, Kethvar. I don't know anything about fighting cosmic horrors." "You know more than you realize, young guardian." The ship's systems hummed with encouragement. "Watch." The cockpit transformed around her. The walls became transparent, revealing not the sterile interior of Bay 94, but the vast expanse of space itself. Stars hung around her like jewels, and she could somehow sense the life that pulsed on thousands of worlds throughout the spiral arm. "This is what the Anuri called the deep sight," Kethvar explained, "the ability to perceive the underlying connections that bind all conscious life together. Very few beings can access it naturally, but humans with certain genetic markers can be taught." Zara gasped as golden threads of light became visible, connecting every star, every world, every living mind in an intricate web of consciousness. She could feel the dreams of children on distant planets, the hopes of explorers pushing toward unknown frontiers, the fierce determination of soldiers standing guard at the galaxy's edge. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "And fragile," Kethvar added. "The Devourers do not simply destroy matter. They sever these connections, leaving isolated points of consciousness to wither and die alone. This is why traditional weapons are useless against them. They must be fought on the level of consciousness itself." The vision faded, leaving Zara back in the familiar confines of the cockpit. But she could still sense those golden threads, just at the edge of perception. How long do we have? She asked. The advanced scouts arrived 2 months ago, Kethvar replied, and Zara felt her blood turn to ice. They have been testing the outer rim colonies, probing for weaknesses. The main force will arrive within 5 of your years. 2 months? But nobody's reported any attacks, because the scouts do not destroy. They infiltrate, they study. They learn how consciousness functions in this galaxy so that the main force can be more efficient when it arrives. Images flashed through Zara's mind, mining colonies that had gone silent, exploration ships that had simply vanished, research stations that had stopped responding to communications, all of it dismissed as equipment failures, pirate raids, or simple accidents of deep space exploration. Someone has to warn them, Zara said. The military, the colonial governments, and tell them what? Kethvar's voice carried gentle skepticism. That an invisible enemy from another galaxy is infiltrating their minds? That the only defense is technology that violates every known law of physics? That their salvation depends on a 12-year-old girl and her talking spaceship? Zara slumped in her seat. When you put it like that, this is why the Anuri always worked from the shadows, young guardian. Civilizations must grow into their understanding of such threats gradually, or they collapse under the weight of existential terror. So what's the plan? We finish restoring this ship to full functionality. We locate the other hidden Anuri vessels scattered throughout the galaxy. We train you to use abilities that your species has never imagined possible. And when the time comes, we ensure that humanity and its allies are ready to fight a war unlike anything they have ever conceived. As if summoned by their conversation, alarms began blaring throughout the dock. Zara quickly accessed the station's emergency channels, her new neural interfaces allowing her to process the incoming data streams at superhuman speed. Multiple contacts approaching the system, the station controller's voice crackled over the comm. Configuration unknown. They're not responding to hails. Through the ship's enhanced sensors, Zara could see them. 3 vessels that seemed to bend light around themselves, making them difficult to focus on directly. They moved with a fluid grace that reminded her of predators stalking prey. Are those... she began. Devourer scouts, Kethvar confirmed, his mental voice sharp with urgency. They have detected our activation signatures. We are not yet ready to face them directly. The Reaper's systems came alive around her as Kethvar began emergency startup procedures. Ancient weapons arrays powered up with sounds like singing crystals, and the ship's hull began to shimmer with protective energy fields. What about the station? Zara asked, watching as the mysterious ships drew closer to Korath Station's defensive perimeter. There are thousands of people aboard. The scouts will not attack openly. They seek to study and infiltrate, not destroy. But our presence here endangers everyone. We must lead them away. Zara's hands moved across the controls with a surety that surprised her. Kethvar's knowledge was flowing into her mind, teaching her to pilot systems that no human should have been able to understand. The ship's engines, silent for decades, began their warming cycle. Korath Control, this is the vessel in Bay 94, she said into the comm. I'm experiencing some kind of system malfunction. My engines are starting up on their own. Bay 94, shut down immediately, came the frantic reply. You do not have clearance for... The transmission cut off as the unknown ship suddenly accelerated, racing toward the station with impossible speed. Whatever they had come looking for, they had found it. Hold tight, young guardian, Kethvar said as the Reaper's engines reached full power. Your real education is about to begin. The docking clamps released with explosive bolts, and suddenly they were free, racing away from Korath Station toward the dark between the stars. Behind them, the 3 scout ships changed course, abandoning their approach to the station in favor of pursuit. Zara watched the tactical displays as their hunters gained ground with terrifying efficiency. Can we outrun them? Not with conventional propulsion, Kethvar replied. But this vessel was never meant to rely on conventional anything. Are you ready to see what an Anuri starfighter is truly capable of? Before Zara could answer, space itself began to warp around them. The stars elongated into streamers of light, and she felt the universe fold inward as they slipped between the cracks in reality itself. The pursuing ships fell behind, unable to follow into the spaces between dimensions. "Welcome to the Shadow Roads, young guardian," Kethvar said, as they sailed through a realm where physics was merely a suggestion. "Your great-grandmother helped build these pathways. Now we use them to begin your true mission." Ahead of them, barely visible through the shifting darkness, Zara could see lights, other ships, other survivors, waiting in the spaces between worlds. The real war was about to begin, and she was no longer just a girl with an unusual starfighter. She was becoming something else entirely. The hidden fleet stretched across dimensional space like a constellation of hope. Dozens of ships from countless species hung suspended in the shadow realm, all bearing the subtle modifications that marked them as Anuri hybrid vessels. Some retained their original forms: sleek Altarian cruisers, bulky Terran haulers, elegant Centauri exploration ships. Others had been so thoroughly transformed that their origins were unrecognizable. At the center of the formation hung a ship unlike anything Zara had ever seen. It appeared to be grown rather than built, its organic curves glowing with the same bioluminescence she had noticed in the Reaper's upgraded systems. Patterns of light flowed across its hull like slow rivers, and she could sense vast intelligence radiating from its core. "The Concordance," Kethvar explained as they approached the massive vessel. "The last of the true Anuri ships, and the current headquarters of our resistance. Your great-grandmother awaits us aboard." Zara's heart hammered as docking tendrils extended from the bio-ship to embrace the Reaper. She had grown up on stories of Captain Sarah Chen, the legendary explorer who had vanished into the unknown. The thought of actually meeting her was both terrifying and exhilarating. The docking process was unlike anything at a normal spaceport. Instead of mechanical clamps and pressurized tubes, the Concordance seemed to absorb the smaller ship into itself. Zara found herself walking through corridors that pulsed with gentle warmth, heading toward what Kethvar identified as the command chamber. She entered a spherical room where gravity seemed to come from every direction at once. Beings of various species moved through the space with fluid grace, their forms partially translucent as if they existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. At the center of the chamber stood a figure that made Zara's breath catch. The woman was unmistakably human in basic form, but something fundamental had changed. Her skin had a subtle luminescence, and her eyes held depths that seemed to contain entire galaxies. When she turned toward Zara, her smile was both alien and achingly familiar. "Hello, little star," she said, and Zara recognized the voice from her grandmother's old recordings. "You've grown so much since I last saw you." "Great-grandmother Sarah?" Zara's voice came out as barely a whisper. "In a sense." The transformed woman approached, moving with a grace that defied the chamber's complex gravity. "Though I am also Serenthala, and something new that was born from our joining. You may call me whatever feels right to you." Zara settled on grandmother, which seemed to please the hybrid entity. "Kethvar told me about the Devourers, about what's coming. Yes, the advanced scouts you encountered were only the beginning. The main force has accelerated their timeline." Sarah Seren moved to the chamber's central display, which showed a three-dimensional map of the galaxy. Dark spots were spreading like an infection along the outer rim. "They've been more successful than we anticipated in establishing infiltration nodes." A new voice joined the conversation, carried by the living ship itself. "The enemy adapts quickly to this galaxy's consciousness patterns. Each world they touch becomes easier for them to corrupt. This is the Concordance itself speaking, Sarah Soren explained. The ship and I share a similar hybrid nature. Zara studied the galactic display, her enhanced perception allowing her to see patterns that would have been invisible to normal human senses. The infiltration wasn't random. It was strategic, targeting key worlds that would provide maximum leverage over the galaxy's major powers. They're going after the industrial worlds first, she realized. If they control the places that build ships and weapons, the galaxy's defenders will be crippled before they even know a war has begun, Sarah Soren confirmed. This is why the direct approach would fail. We cannot fight them conventionally because they've already compromised the infrastructure conventional forces depend upon. Then how do we stop them? The chamber filled with new arrivals, the commanders of the hidden fleet. Zara saw humans, Altarians, Korath, and species she didn't recognize, all bearing the subtle marks of a Nuri enhancement. Each moved with the same fluid grace she was beginning to associate with hybrid consciousness. We fight them the way my people should have from the beginning, said a being that seemed to be made of crystallized light. Not as separate species defending separate worlds, but as a unified consciousness that transcends individual identity. Sarah Soren gestured to the assembled commanders. The network, as we call ourselves. Each ship, each commander, each crew member is a node in a larger pattern of awareness. The Devourers cannot infiltrate what they cannot comprehend. A Korath officer stepped forward, her mandibles clicking in what Zara was learning to recognize as excitement. Young Guardian, your arrival marks the completion of our preparations. With the Reaper restored and your abilities awakened, we can begin the final phase. Which is? Zara asked. The galactic display shifted, showing projected fleet movements and strategic positions. We reveal ourselves, Sarah Soren said, not to governments or military commanders, but to the consciousness of ordinary people. The Devourers' greatest weakness is that they cannot conceive of truly unified resistance. They expect fear, confusion, every species fighting alone for its own survival. Instead, the crystalline being added, we give them something their kind has never encountered, a galaxy that chooses to stand together. Zara felt the weight of destiny settling on her shoulders. What's my role in all this? Kethavar's presence touched her mind. You are the bridge, young Guardian. Your genetic heritage allows you to interface with a Nuri consciousness, but your human nature keeps you connected to your own species. You will be our voice when we reveal ourselves to humanity. And if they don't believe me, then you show them what we've shown you, Sarah Soren said simply. The truth of what consciousness can accomplish when it acts in harmony. The chamber's displays shifted again, showing real-time images from across the galaxy. On a dozen worlds, people were beginning to notice strange dreams, unexplained insights, moments of clarity that seemed to come from outside themselves. The network had been quietly seeding enhanced awareness throughout the population, preparing them for what was coming. The Devourers will make their move soon, the Concordance announced. Our sensors detect massive disruptions in interdimensional space. The main force is preparing to transition into our reality. Alarms began sounding throughout the bioship as scout reports flooded in. The enemy was no longer hiding. Across the outer rim, infiltrated colonies were revealing their true nature, turning their industrial capacity toward the construction of impossible weapons that could wound reality itself. It's beginning, Sarah Soren said, and Zara could hear both sorrow and determination in her voice. Commanders, return to your ships. It's time to show this galaxy what unity looks like. As the hybrid beings began dispersing to their vessels, Sarah Soren approached Zara one final time. Are you ready for this, little star? What we're asking of you will change everything about your life. Zara thought about her parents on Mars Colony 7. probably going about their daily routines with no idea that the fate of consciousness itself hung in the balance. She thought about her grandmother's stories, about the courage required to step into the unknown. She thought about the golden threads of connection she had seen binding all life together. "I'm scared," she admitted. "Good," Sarah Seren replied. "Fear keeps you humble, but don't let it keep you from becoming what you're meant to be." The trip back to the Reaper felt like a journey toward destiny. As Zara settled into the pilot's seat, she could feel the ship's consciousness merging more completely with her own. The distinction between her thoughts and Kethavar's was becoming increasingly blurred. "Are you ready to address your species?" Kethavar asked, as they prepared to return to normal space. Zara activated the ship's communication array, which was far more powerful than its humble appearance suggested. With the network's help, she could reach every human settlement, every exploration ship, every colony world simultaneously. "People of Earth and all human worlds," she began, her voice carrying across space on channels both technological and telepathic. "My name is Zara Chen, great-granddaughter of Captain Sarah Chen. I'm 12 years old, and I have something important to tell you about what's coming." Across human space, people stopped what they were doing to listen. The enhanced awareness that had been quietly growing in their minds suddenly focused, allowing them to hear not just her words but the truth behind them. "An enemy from beyond our galaxy is coming to destroy everything we are. Not just our bodies or our worlds, but our very consciousness, our ability to think and feel and dream. They've already begun infiltrating the outer colonies, turning our own technology against us." She paused, feeling the weight of millions of minds focusing on her message. "But we're not alone. There are allies who have been preparing for this moment for longer than our species has existed. And there are others, humans who have undergone transformation to gain the abilities we'll need to fight back." Through the network's connections, she could sense the reactions across human space: fear, confusion, but also something else. A growing sense of unity as people realized that their recent dreams and insights had been preparation for this moment. "I know this sounds impossible," Zara continued, "but I'm going to show you something that will prove what I'm saying is true. Look to the stars." Across the galaxy, the hidden fleet revealed itself. Ships materialized out of dimensional space above every major world, their hulls glowing with Anuri modifications. The sight was simultaneously reassuring and terrifying, proof that humanity was not alone, but also that the universe was far stranger and more dangerous than anyone had imagined. "These are our allies," Zara explained as wonder and panic spread across the communication channels. "And this is our choice. We can face what's coming as separate worlds, separate colonies, separate people, and we will lose. Or we can choose to stand together as one consciousness, one voice, one unified defense of everything that makes life worth living." The response was immediate and overwhelming. On worlds throughout human space, people began reaching out to each other, forming connections that transcended normal communication. The enhanced awareness that the network had been quietly fostering suddenly blossomed into something unprecedented. An entire species beginning to think and act as one. "The Devourers feed on isolation and fear," Zara said, feeling the growing unity through her connection to the network. "Let's give them something they've never faced before. Let's show them what happens when consciousness chooses to be truly free." In the depths of space, something vast and hungry recoiled in surprise. For the first time in millions of years, the Devourers had encountered a response they didn't understand. The prey was refusing to run, refusing to hide, refusing to fight as individuals. Instead, they were becoming something new. The war for consciousness had begun, and humanity had chosen to face it not as victims, but as guardians of everything that made existence meaningful. A 12-year-old girl and her impossible starfighter had lit a flame that would either illuminate the darkness or burn everything down in the attempt. But for the first time since leaving Earth, humans were not facing the unknown alone.